Hello, Mike. Welcome to Rebel Force Radio in the Cantina. Great to see you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Good to see you both.
I just want to start off by talking about the incredible range you've had in your career, from puppeteering to animation, and then, of course, for Star Wars fans, crossing over from the original trilogy to then, the sequel trilogy, and it's really been something. Did you set out? How much was it by design, and how much of it was by accident that you ended up where you've ended up?
I would say 95% was absolutely by design, by obsession, by force of will, by not doing this was not an option. No, I mean, I initially set out specifically to be a puppeteer like the Muppets, especially for the Muppets. That's what I really wanted to do. So that was definitely there's a picture with Jim Henson on the pilot for Mother Goose, Jim Henson's Mother Goose series, in the mid '80s. He had so much fun. He was great. So no, I don't really think anything was by accident. When I wanted to do character animation, that was also by design. In the when was it? Early to mid '90s. Mid '90s. I was aware of CG being a thing, and I was using computers a little bit to lose puppeteers and arm rods and make a puppet wink that couldn't wink and things like that. And I had a little animation program that I was playing around with on my little Mac machine. But Toy Story had just come out, and I loved how the characters and story were just so. It was just so new, and so well told, and the characters were so much fun. And in a way, they seemed like, to me, they were kind of like the new Muppets in some ways. So I sort of went about getting recruited by Pixar, and that's what happened at a London show. So everything was by design, basically, by just obsessing and wanting it.
Well,
a lot.
That leap from traditional puppetry to computer animation. I mean, did you have background in computer science and programming, or was it strictly from your experiences bringing characters to life through puppetry?
Right, that's a good question, actually. No, I had no. Computers. Even now, I'm very visual. I'm not really a hotkey kind of person. I don't have a mouse here at my desk. I actually have a Wacom and a pen, or Wacom as some people call it. And there is no mouse here. I use this as my mouse. So I kind of, it's like drawing, but no, I had no computer skills other than what I was teaching myself before I was recruited, using things like After Effects and doing morphing in elastic reality and early versions of Photoshop that only had like one layer in them, and like I said, this computer program. So to me, animation was really just another way of bringing something to life, only with a bit more control. It wasn't real time, unfortunately, but also that was a good thing because you could really plan your poses very carefully. So I was able to translate my acting and puppeteering and performing timings and knowledge into the characters, the Pixar CG characters. And when Pixar recruited us, there weren't the animation schools at that time. It just didn't exist. So they were having a hard time crewing up, finding people. So they said, we can teach people to use computers and our system, but we can't teach people to act. And so that's why they pulled people like me in, because they knew at least we could perform and act, and they knew that they could teach me to use their system, their animation system. So in some ways, it was somewhat of a leap, but not a huge one. I think we went through what they called Pixar University. There was about 8 or 12 of us, I think, in a training room class at Pixar before Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life started up. And how long was that? 6 weeks? I can't remember now. But yeah, we were in an intensive class, basically learning their software, their animation software.
Well, your career has certainly gone through so many incredible paths, but what I'm really interested in is your Muppet stuff and how that led you to Star Wars, because your story is so incredible, because you were very driven at a young age. And as a teenager, you found yourself on the set of The Muppet Show. And I just want to know how that happens, how a kid goes from making his own puppets to actually being able to have access to and hang out at The Muppet Show, opening up then a career for you. It's a really cool story, and I kind of liken it to Steven Spielberg in a way, how Spielberg used to hang around at Universal all the time when he was a teenager growing up in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit sort of mystical and magical in a way, because the coincidences of timings and locations that had to happen to enable me to become there in that way were a bit fantastic, really, and a bit fairy tale, a bit unreal in a way. So let's see. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, yes. How do I say this?
Did you just show up at the door? You just knocked at the door and you say, "Hey, I got some puppets."
Almost.
Yeah?
I mean, I was a big fan of the early seasons of the Muppet Show. So we're talking 1976, 77, and so it was sort of an evolution. In the second season of the Muppet Show, or just before then. Actually, they hadn't started the second season yet. The main 5 Muppet puppeteers were appearing at a local London radio station on one of the Saturday lunchtime shows. So that was the first time I met them. I intercepted them in the lobby and got their autographs. So I would be about 13 then, I think. So that was the first part of my journey towards Muppets. So I accosted them, and I was sort of a huge fan. And then a couple of years later, they'd made the Muppet movie, the first big Muppet film, and it was premiering, had the Royal World premiere in London, and I actually called up Lou Grade's office, who was the exec producer. He owned the TV studio, he owned the film company. And
how'd you get his phone
tickets.
number? How'd you get his phone number? You're just a kid. Would you look it up in the phone book?
I looked it up somewhere. I think in one of the trades, or I got it from somewhere. But somewhere I saw that there was, because it was a charity event as well. You could buy tickets, and I found this number somewhere, and called and bought 2 tickets, one for myself and one for my mother, with my pocket money, and somehow it took me through to his office, which is, I guess, where they were selling the tickets. So so I went to the premiere of the Muppet movie. And with my pocket money, and had to get a tuxedo and and all that stuff, and a bow tie, so I met a few more of the Muppet guys again there, and I don't know if you know Spike Milligan. He was on the Muppet Show. He was one of the original goons from the UK 50s 60s radio show. That's kind of what set up Monty Python. So I met Spike, and so I got a few autographs on my ticket. So that was the second time I had encountered and forced my way into their domain, into their world.
Yes.
There's a lesson here. This is kind of, there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely.
And then in 1980, which was the final year of my required schooling, my dad had a job where he was working at a company that had something to do with providing some entertainment for the TV studio, which was ATV in Borehamwood at Elstree, and there was something to do with their club, the ATV club, for people that worked at the studio. So he got to know, I guess, the accountant there, and that's how I got my very first visit to the Muppet Show. So that was 1980, the beginning of 80, in the final season, and the guest was Linda Carter. They always had a guest on a Wednesday, so I'd always visit on a Wednesday. And apparently she spoke to me, and I was so obsessed with Muppet guys, I totally ignored her. So
that was Wonder Woman. You snubbed Wonder Woman for a Muppet? Wow, that's impressive.
Well,
Priorities, Mike. Priorities.
Well, that's it. That's it. One must get these things right. And then after that, because in the UK you had this thing called work experience, where you were allowed so many days and weeks to sort of learn about a kind of trade that you may want to do as your career. The school had given up on me at that time anyway. They were like, I went to the careers advice that they have, and they said, we can't help you. Just keep doing what you're doing. Bye. Good luck. See ya. So they were happy for me to have days off school, and every few weeks or so I'd get on the bus. I could take one bus that went from the bottom of my street and dump me out half an hour later outside the studio. One bus ride.
Perfect.
Which is crazy. I mean, I always thought Muppet Show was made in America because it was an American show. And here I was, North London. What are the odds of that? So that's kind of a strange thing too. But anyway, I would sort of bribe my way into the studio every few weeks or so by giving the accountant cigarettes and chocolates as a thank you.
Was this like a prison transaction?
It kind of was. I was 15 at the time, and I was buying cigarettes, and the accountant was willing and happy to take them from me.
This kid got packs of cigarettes.
Yes. Oh yeah. But hey, I didn't care.
Either you're an obsessed fan, or you're somehow connected to organized crime as a 15-year-old doing stuff like that. So
either way. Yeah.
It's like the movie Goodfellas, but with puppets.
Yeah. So basically, they got to know me, and I would find excuses to get their attention every time I would visit. Like sometimes I had some scrapbooks and I'd have them sign those. One time I brought my little cassette recorder with a microphone and got what I called verbal autographs from them. So I have their voices giving me some verbal autographs.
Do you still have those recordings?
Yeah, I digitized them. Yeah, some of them are kind of short, but yeah, I had Jim Frank and Jerry Nelson, Richard Hunt, Steve Whitmire, Louise Gold. Wow. So I have those as well. So it was whatever I could do to get attention. But every once in a while, I would bring in puppets that I'd made. At home, experiments, animals and things out of fleece and fur and foam and stuff like that. Not that great, but the beginnings of a potential, I guess, puppet making. Because I also thought, well, all these, everything I'd read too was all these main Muppet performers. Not only are they American, but they're all like 6 foot whatever tall, 6'2", 6'4", and I'm like 5'6". So I thought, well, okay, I might be a bit too short to be a puppeteer, but maybe I can build for them, most of the Muppets were built, of course, in New York anyway at their main workshop.
But, you just wanted to be connected to the industry in any way you could, even if it didn't mean being a performer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I loved all things puppets, and I love the Muppets anyway. So they got to know me, and one of the Muppet builders who was in the because I had a workshop next to the stage, attached to the stage. So they would build ongoing Muppets of the Week and repairs and costumes and all that stuff. So one of the Muppet builders was a guy called Bobby Payne, who actually went to school with Jim, and he worked on the original Sam and Friends in the 50s. So he was building some Muppets for the final season there in the shop, and he remembered. I don't know if I really met him then as such, but he'd obviously seen me bring these puppets in, and had paid attention. So when the Muppet Show finished, and I got recruited on the Great Muppet Caper as a crowd puppeteer, basically, and an assistant. Bobby Payne heard that I was around, and he recruited me to help him build the Podlings and Slaves for the Dark Crystal, which was happening at the same time. So I actually got to build and perform simultaneously back and forth. Whenever I wasn't needed on set for the Great Muppet Caper, I'd be back at the Hampstead, London workshop building puppets for the Dark Crystal with Bobby Payne. So
the strategy seemed to be stick around for so long and so often that eventually they just start giving you stuff to do.
Well, that was the thing. I'd heard many years later that apparently Jim had said, well, he's around all the time anyway. I might as well just give him a job. So I didn't know that at the time.
Exactly.
And then I also heard that he was worried. It did. But I also heard that he was actually really concerned that he was taking me away from my college education or something, and that kind of bothered him, because apparently that's a big thing for Americans, education. I don't know what that's all about. However, it wasn't really an option for me because, coming from a very working class family, you leave school and you go get a job and that's it. And that was what was expected of me. So, but however, that was like the golden era for Henson and Muppets, that late 70s and into the early 80s, where all this new stuff was happening. So that was better than any college. There was nowhere to go to learn this stuff at that time. It just didn't exist. And so what better to learn from the masters? Be around them, be under them, and be close to them, and be, when I wasn't needed, I'd be always watching all the time and learning. So I had my training on the job. I had no skills when they hired me other than just practicing in front of a mirror. But Jim, I guess, he was good like that. He just saw some potential, and always knew to try, I guess, knew to try people out.
And so that just opened the door for you professionally. And what impresses me about you is I always love the opportunity when we get to talk to people who contributed to the original Star Wars trilogy. But what's amazing about you is this all set you on a career path where you not only worked on the original trilogy, but you worked on the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. I don't think we've talked to anyone, well, outside of Anthony Daniels, who has worked on all three trilogies.
Right.
So that's impressive.
You had Peter Mayhew, Warwick Davis, let's see.
Warwick, of course.
Yeah, Warwick worked on all three trilogies too. There's not many people there. There's a handful of us. So, albeit in the first trilogy, I wasn't a performer. I was an animator, but I was still in one movie. But yeah, so it is kind of yeah, exactly. So that is kind of unusual, and to see it go from old school 1970s, 80s filmmaking, with real film, with basically all the same techniques that had been used for, almost 100 years at that point. And then go to fully digital. I think it was either Toy Story 2 or Bug's Life was the first film ever to go from digital production to digital projection. So the whole 100% from making to viewing was 100% digital. I think it was one of those two. So I worked on those as well. I forget which it was, but and then we all thought, okay, film's dead. It's all digital now, and it's great, and that's fine and stuff. And then of course we go back to film again with JJ and Force Awakens. So it was kind of like going full circle again as well. So I'd seen it go from analog to digital and back to analog again.
Well, so I don't think I realized that The Force Awakens was totally analog. I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, for the most part, there may have been some effect shots that they did digitally. I know certainly on The Last Jedi and the last movie too, I think there might have been some times where they used digital cameras for specific reasons, practical reasons, I think. So I assume they did that on the first one too. But for the most part, it was film. And they would, he had special lenses made, I believe, as well, for those cameras. So to go back to seeing these big cans of film on top of the camera again and having them change the film out and, rewind them in a dark black bag so they could go off to processing and stuff. It was amazing to see after all this time. It's wonderful, really. It's film is just this crazy chemical, it's light on a piece of acetate or whatever, and it's I don't understand how it works, but it's amazing. Isn't it though? It's crazy.
Yeah, that is true.
So the whole time that you're kind of getting your foot in the door with the Henson Company, there's this other phenomenon sort of brewing in the late 70s and early 80s called Star Wars. What was your earliest awareness of Star Wars? And then how did that, how did your, obviously your association with Henson Company and, put you on the set of Return of the Jedi?
Yeah. Again, though, I mean, sort of planned, but it's sort of evolutionary as well, I suppose. I went to see Star Wars as 11, 12? I don't know how old I was. 13, I don't know. But saw Star Wars when it first came out, and it was just called Star Wars then. So to me, it's always Star Wars.
Of course.
But, so that was great. Loved it. Saw it a few times. Thought it was amazing. But then when early pictures and things started coming out for Empire Strikes Back, some press photos and teasers and stuff like that, there was this thing called Yoda, and I saw these images of Yoda standing there on Dagobah, and read that it was Frank Oz, and that Wendy Froud had been involved in some of the making the body and the original sculpts, and who of course worked on Dark Crystal and stuff. But I didn't know who she was at that time. She had built some Muppets actually for Henson on Muppet Show. So I was like, wow, what is this? This is amazing. How is he going to move? Because it's not a Muppet. So we didn't really have animatronics then. We hadn't even had ET yet. So this was like a new thing. So I was like fascinated. Who is this guy? What does he sound like? How is he? He's a puppet, but how? What's happening here? It was a revolutionary thing. It was like 79, I guess. So of course, when Empire came out, I just loved it. Saw it millions of times, and that was always my favorite. They were my favorite scenes in the movie, of course, the Yoda stuff. So now when Return of the Jedi came along, of course, I was on the film almost the entire time, going from creature to creature, randomly, whatever they needed. But then because I'd assisted Frank Oz, working right hands for him for Fozzie Bear and Miss Piggy and stuff like that, it really wasn't that different a job with Yoda. So I guess, I was small, so I could keep out of the way. The set was really tight. But he knew he could trust me to do what he needed. So you experience Empire as a fan, someone going to the cinema, seeing it, and then fast forward a couple years later, you're on the set and you're doing work with Frank and puppeteering one of the arms. In Yoda's heart. It was great. And that's the thing, though. I mean, just from a fan point of view, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I mean, I have to put my professional hat on and be a performer, be a puppeteer, creature performer, actor, or whatever. But there's the other side where you're like, oh, this is so great. What's going to happen in this movie? I'd seen the first two films. This is the final trilogy, and seeing them all wear their different costumes, and I hadn't seen the script, of course, so I didn't know what was going to happen. So it was great. Like, oh, there's the Falcon, and here's Dagobah. I could walk around Dagobah at lunchtime. Nobody was around. So
that's amazing.
Just open the stage door and walk around and go up into Luke's into the the transport that goes up to to Vader there. What I forget what that thing is, that little transport ship. Go inside there, walk around and sit down. They just weren't bothered about that stuff back then. So it was really exciting for me, just like, okay, I actually get to see firsthand what's really going to happen as it unfolds, And the very first thing they filmed was the entryway into Jabba's palace, where they meet Bib Fortuna and 3PO goes in through the door and stuff like that. So I watched them film a little bit of that. And then the next big scene that they filmed was Jabba's palace. So Tim Rose and I were rehearsing Sice Noodles, the singer, and I got to perform the close-up Reese character, the three-eyed character, for the close-ups as a puppet. And then we were also rehearsing Admiral Akbar at the same time as well, so for later on. So it was just really kind of an evolution. You just go from one character to the next. But animatronics were a new thing, and because we'd done the Dark Crystal, we were trained up. We knew how to move characters in a more realistic way, less Muppety, and when to blink and how to make a face act with three different people. Let's say sometimes not just be a cartoon Muppet bouncing around. So we learned that, and the Jedi was the next film in the same studio after the Dark Crystal. So they just recruited a bunch of us. I never
you say that you went back and forth between the different characters and the different puppets. Did you know, at the beginning which characters you were going to be doing, or was it just kind of, you sort of made it up as you went along?
Yeah, no, I had no idea. When I was hired, I had a little meeting with Robert Watts, the producer, and he just said, "Oh, you've done all this stuff with on Dark Crystal and with Henson, and we'd like to have you on the movie as a puppeteer." I was like, great. No idea what I was going to do. I don't think even they knew exactly either. So no, when I started on the film, all I knew was I was assisting Tim with Akbar and Snoodles, and then because I was, I guess, there and they could see I was competent, then they gave me Reese. Phil Tippett gave me that one, I think, heading up the creature shop, and then we were filming on the sail barge with Jabba, and I was doing some Reese stuff in there as well, so I was already on set for that. I think most of that stuff got cut in the final cut, but they pulled me inside Jabba because when he was being strangled, he needed extra stuff going on in his face, so I got to do a bit of Jabba, and then.
So you were up inside the Jabba? You were in there?
Yeah, I was down in his near his spleen somewhere, I think.
The spleen. You played Jabba's spleen. I don't think
it
says that on your. It doesn't say that on your credit list.
Well, it was. I think it was like hitting me in the side of the head, like when he was being strangled. Like, stop it, Jabba's innards. But so that kind of just happened organically, and then somehow maybe the.
I get it organically. I get it
organically, exactly. Gastrically. And then somehow I then was doing baby Ewoks. I forget how. I guess that they just said come and do this, so I came and did that. And then Nien Nunb was an accident as well because I was around. That I never auditioned for anything, so it just kind of went from one thing to the next.
And he's your most well-known role. There he is.
Yeah, I love the guy. Yeah, he's great. he's been good to me.
Well, how about hanging out in the cockpit with Billy Dee Williams? Do you have any Billy Dee stories?
Well, that's the thing. We hadn't really properly met before then, actually. I mean, he was on set in Jabba's palace in disguise, but we never talked, we never chatted. And at that point, Nien Nunb wasn't even a thing. He wasn't even intended to be in the Falcon when we started filming. So,
really?
So Billy Dee and I didn't. Yeah, it was a later edition. So I'd say maybe about a month before filming that scene, George Lucas decided to use him for that. So, and in fact, he was just a non-articulated mask, worn in the background, essentially. So he didn't have any eye movement or mouth movement. So I suggested he become a hand puppet, so that he could talk in the dialogue. And Phil Tippett said, "Oh, that's a great idea." So then suddenly I got that job, I guess, too, just by hanging around Phil Tippett's workshop and suggesting that. But yeah, hanging out with Billy Dee, we pretty well met properly we didn't do read-throughs, we didn't do rehearsals. We'd rehearse the blocking in the set, and they'd figure out the shots and the lighting, because the lighting had to keep changing, and so we got to know each other while we were filming, essentially. And he was great, though. He laughed and joked in between the takes and stuff. We would rehearse the scene, and then they'd lower the puppet on, and he'd have his final makeup and hair and costume checks, and we'd shoot it a bunch of times and move on to the next and on to the next. So we got to know each other then, but he was very gracious. He's always been very nice. And then, I've seen him at shows and over the decades, had plenty of lovely meals and dinners with him. And then, of course, on the final movie as well. So, Billy's awesome. He's always been really, really nice and very gracious. And he's a lovely man. So,
well, we love Billy Dee around here. And,
yeah.
I mean, you're just instantly cool by such a larger degree because you were able to hang with Billy Dee. And so what, you like poke your head up under the floor in between takes and just be like, hey, Billy Dee, down here.
It's almost like I kind of didn't have to, because the whole cockpit was on a gimbal, you know, so they could rock it around manually with stagehands. So there was no hole in the floor. I actually had to lie flat on my back with my legs under the console there, you know, that you can see in front. So I was literally on my back, lying on a furniture pad with a monitor on my chest, and I was mic'd up. I had a little clip mic attached to me, a lav mic. And I spoke everything in English, so it made sense. I wrote my own dialogue, and you know, stuff that kind of made sense for Billy, so that his answers would be logical as well. So it helped feed him the lines as well, I think. But it
Do
also
you remember?
gave Nien
Can
yeah,
you
just
recall
stuff like
any of those lines?
yeah, like, you know, we're not getting a reading on the shield, and old TIE fighters at 12 o'clock, and stuff like that, you know, just things that somewhere I might even have my original script where I'd penciled that stuff in. It was like 5 pages or something, but I'll have to look for that. Yeah, so I just wrote my dialogue, because the script didn't really have any dialogue in there, and so I mean, basically, when in between setups, they would, you know, Phil Tippett or whoever would reach into the cockpit window and pull the puppet off of me, and you know, I'd just be lying on my back where the seat, because they had to take the actual seat of the co-pilot in the Falcon away, you know, so it was just the chair back. So otherwise, there wouldn't have been room for me. So I could just look up and see Billy Dee, and I'd just lay there, and we'd hang out and chat. So,
Mike, how involved were you, or were the puppeteers in the actual development and the creation of the puppets, or did you just show up on set and they hand it to you and you've got to make magic out of it?
For the most part, they were all designed and built and developed at ILM in San Rafael. So I know Tim Rose was involved in the build as well out there before the shoot. But Phil Tippett headed that up, and people like Kirk Thatcher were a part of that build as well. And Kirk, you know, is involved in Muppets now. He has been since the 80s, I think, late 80s. So, for the most part, that stuff was designed and built there. But then things like when they gave me the baby Ewok, it was just a hollow piece of foam, and there was nothing in there. So I glued in like little thumb grips to get his mouth to do this sort of stuff, and just made it, puppetized it a little bit more. What else? And then things like Nien Nunb, I basically set up how to do it as a hand puppet so that you could work it like a Muppet, essentially. And I showed them how to do that, which is probably how I got the job. And then they just shipped it off and put mechanical, you know, eye blinks and ear wiggles. They shipped the head back to, after I'd sort of puppetized the mouth, they shipped it back to ILM to be mechanized for a couple of weeks. And then it came back to us to film on. So I had a say in that side of things. But that's not normal, you know.
Hey, did George Lucas,
about what I do.
Was George Lucas ever on the set to give you direction?
Well, yeah. In fact, like going back to George was around all the time. You know, next to the camera and yeah, being a quiet, creative part of the entire film for sure. But when we suggested that Nien Nunb could actually be done as a puppet for the Falcon scenes, we did a little film test, and George Lucas directed that, and he just directed, you know, told the puppet where to look, and we said some stuff, and you know, he shot it on film and said, great, you know, let's do it. So he was part of that decision, and then when we came to film it. This was something like May, I think, of 1982. So the film was well on the way, maybe even 2/3, 3/4 into production at that point. And they were getting a little bit behind on their schedule. And I think Richard Marquand was, I think, directing the Rancor pit scenes on another stage at the same time. So George actually took over directing duty of the Falcon cockpit scenes, and I guess they would communicate with each other. And I assume Richard must have gone back and forth, but being in the Falcon, I wouldn't really have seen that. But George directed those shots, those scenes. And that's, you don't really read about that, I don't think, anywhere. So
No.
George was very much.
I mean, there's always been, Mike, a bit of controversy is not the right word, but speculation maybe about how much of Jedi was Richard Marquand, as the director, and how much was George. But I guess I would say, and you were on the set, that George was the architect of the whole thing, so naturally he's going to have a very tight involvement with the director.
Yeah, it almost seems in a way. I mean, certainly, George was the touchstone, I'm sure. I mean, he was I guess the foundation of what the writer then created and what the director then did. But then also you had what's his name, Tompkins, the first AD. And so, he also contributed with the little bits and pieces and filled in the gaps for us on set, telling us what to do and making suggestions. So in a way, it was almost like between the three of them, they created that movie, to me anyway. I might be completely wrong, but I would say it was almost Marquand and the first AD and George together, and maybe the director of photography would have had a lot of say as well, and so it's very much a collaboration for sure. And
then take us. I don't want to skip too much, but let's talk a little bit about the coming back for the prequels. You were an animator at that point, and so what was the you probably had thought you had left Star Wars behind, and then you end up working on Attack of the Clones.
Well, I always wanted to. I mean, the thing is, I remember when we were making Jedi, the intent was always to make 9 films, and I'd always thought to myself, those other 3 films, or the other 6 films even, would be made at some point, even if it's not George, So I had always had in the back of my mind that I could return to these films at some point anyway, so I hadn't ruled that out. But when I was at Pixar, and we'd finished Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life, and I was looking for a new challenge. It's like, been there, done that. I need to give myself a new challenge. But I'd heard from inside sources that Yoda in Episode 2 would be CG, and I thought, well, okay, I've doubled for Frank with his characters. I know the kinetics of how he holds his hand and his arm and why these characters move and look the way they do. And I knew why Yoda moved and looked the way he did because of the way it was set up and the way Frank performs his characters. So I thought they need to know this if they're going to emulate Yoda, the puppet Yoda from Empire and Jedi as CG. They should know this stuff. And so I wanted to be a part of that to kind of help that lineage a little bit. So that's why I went to ILM. However, it didn't quite work out that way because I think they gave us they put you in, just like Pixar did, they put you into like a little month of training or something, I think, where as well. And about halfway through, I literally was halfway through my training, and they needed someone. They lost one of their people for Jurassic Park 3, so they pulled me out, and I was on Jurassic Park 3 for 6 months. And so by the time I went back onto Clones, it was already underway, and a lot of the stuff had been allocated and animated. So I just sort of got what I could get, basically.
Oh, but you had all that Yoda knowledge. You were bringing all that legitimate Yoda knowledge, and then they shove you off on the dinosaurs. What's that all about?
Yeah, I think they didn't. I think from their point of view, I suppose either they didn't really understand what I was getting at or what I was saying, or they just didn't want to be told, it was their baby. This was their big new thing. And, they just don't want stuff taken away from them by some...
I get it, yeah.
Bright spark kid or whatever.
Some know-it-all who just happened to work on the original Yoda with Frank Oz. Yeah,
I know.
Rob Coleman, that guy, he wanted all the credit. That's what was going on.
He was nice, though. Rob was nice. But, yeah. He was my boss, I guess my animation boss. But I liked him, yeah.
What scenes did you end up... Sorry, Jason.
Oh, that's
Go
okay.
ahead. No, go ahead. I'll let Jason ask this one.
No, that's all right. I just was curious if you recalled, any hearing any feelings that Frank might have had, or that you personally had about Yoda going from being a traditional puppet into animation. Now, you had already made that leap, so you probably, I guess, might have been a little more open to the idea, because it was really a big deal for the fans to accept this this new Yoda.
I was pleased, because I didn't like the puppet in episode 1, the original puppet in episode 1. It was it looked too big and heavy, and it was silicon instead of foam, and I think the way they operated. See, in the original Yoda and then the new one, the last one, Frank would work the eyebrow up here, and so his thumb was thrust forward, and so that's how he would do the jaw and the lip, and then the eyebrow was worked this way, and the eyes were in here. Whereas I think when they did episode 1, they cast Frank's hand like this, and Frank's got a big hand, so it pushed this. He made the head a lot larger, pushed his lip out more, the top lip, and then his eyebrows were mechanized, I think. So just going that way alone totally changed the look, size, and dynamics of Yoda as well. But I think he was silicon, and he just didn't look enough to most people, I guess, the way Yoda should have looked. So I was pleased. I thought, well, hey, if they're going to do CG, and they actually showed me their when I first arrived, their animation tests, and it was a very faceted, crude Yoda, but it looked good. But what they'd done is they'd matched shot by shot, frame by frame, some shots from Empire Strikes Back. So he moved. It had Frank's voice. He moved exactly the way Yoda would move. It looked great. But they didn't have any reference when they came to do the actual shots, and I think they should have. And a lot of people were saying, well, I mean, he still could have been a really good puppet in episode 2 and 3. He could have. And people's argument to me was, well, you couldn't do any of those things with a puppet that he was doing, like fighting and all those full-length shots. And of course, that's actually not true. That's just people not knowing what puppets are capable of and how you get those shots, especially now, in the digital age. We can do full-length puppets walking, running. You have special rigs where you can have him spin around and do all these composites and stuff like that. So in reality, you can pretty well do everything with a puppet now, and even then you could have too. We had that, me and my guys had that knowledge puppet wise, that and it would have looked more realistic, to be honest. But nevertheless, everything had to be CG at that point, and you couldn't have any puppets anywhere.
No puppets.
I did.
Frank Oz himself, I've heard Frank Oz mention that he felt relieved that Yoda was CGI, and he thought that was
I
better
can
for
understand
the
that.
character.
Yeah, I could understand that. I mean, also he probably just didn't want the hassle of having to go through all that torment and torture of having to, deal with the puppet Yoda again. And he'd sort of moved on in many ways. He'd become a very, very well-respected director. And he didn't just want to be that puppet guy, and he's not. I understand that for sure.
Right.
But I remember when we were doing Little Shop of Horrors. That was 1986, and most of it was filmed on the big Bond stage. The large stage
On
there.
Pinewood.
And at Pinewood, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all latex rubber and heavy-duty cables with levers and all manual, basically. At one point, there were like 60 puppeteers on the largest plant working that thing. But it was physically really hard because we had to do everything for real, in camera. And we all knew that CG things were happening at that point, that, they were on their way. It had been talked about, and we'd seen a few early things by this time. And I remember thinking at the time, because I was like, we were hurting working those. I was the top lip in some of that stuff, and another guy, Dave Barkley, was the bottom lip. So we had
Jabba.
So exactly. So he was. We were a team. Dave and had a company together for 10 years, so we always work together as a team. So
someday we can maybe see a production of Little Shop of Horrors where Jabba is substituted in for Audrey too. I think that
probably
would be
could do that. I mean, someone will whip that up overnight. It'll be on YouTube tomorrow. It'll already be done. But I remember at the time, it was so hard and physically really difficult for one of the coldest winters ever in the world, too, it seems. And I remember thinking, why don't they just do this with CG? It'll be so much easier, and we won't have to be tortured and tormented. And I can't wait for CG to happen. Then we won't have to do this anymore. And of course, now I'm eating my words, because it's like there's nothing better than seeing the real thing in camera, and that's the genius of it. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And I know they're making a new version of it now, and I assume it's going to be CG. It might be okay, but you're just not going to get that real interaction that you got with the lighting, and even when the plant's mouth closed, you could see it blowing Rick Moranis' hair, and it's just all that stuff, the shadows. I don't know. I mean, you can't beat the real thing. I don't care.
Practical effects. Yeah. Hey, they did bring Frank back and the Yoda puppet in The Last Jedi. Now, how do you think that? Did that feel better to you? Did that feel
I loved it.
authentic?
I loved it. Absolutely. I mean, I could have done with a lot more, but hey, I was so pleased.
Yeah, right.
And I was pleased for Frank that he got to. No, yeah, I mean, I saw Frank again at the premiere in LA of The Last Jedi, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time, so we of course talked about Yoda being back as a real puppet again, and he just grinned real big. He said, I think he quite enjoyed revisiting that, without it being a big deal or anything. So he smiled about it. I think he was happy, and I, as a Yoda fan, I was happy, and I hope that most of the fans out there were happy with that too. And a lot of people initially assumed it was CG again, because he had that glow around him and stuff or whatever. I don't know. They just thought it was CG, but it was all puppet. So I was happy. It was nice.
And Nien Nunb came back too.
Apparently he did, didn't he? Yeah, he kept trying to kill him off, but he kept coming back. So it's like, he's not dead yet.
Interesting. That's interesting you bring that up, because there's been debate amongst fans about whether or not Nien Nunb survived the events of the Rise of Skywalker.
Well, never mind that. They thought he died after The Force Awakens too. Because you see him in the X-wing, and then there's all these. Everybody dies pretty much, and you don't see him at the end. Well, actually, you do, don't you? Well, you see,
you do, yeah.
Yeah, actually, but you don't. Yeah, I mean, you see that like wide shot of them all waving the Falcon goodbye. Hi, bye. See you on the next film.
Right.
But if you're not paying attention, because you should have seen him. Maybe later on, and there are some other scenes which would have shown that he lived. That he survived the X-wing thing. So a lot of people thought that he died in the X-wing if they didn't see him right at the end there.
Wonder if it's possible he could show up in the Rogue Squadron movie. It's
possible
out.
He could show up in a lot of places, because the timeline works. I would have liked to have seen him in Solo as a young Nine hanging out with Lando back there,
Now wait a second here. We're moving away from this topic here. Did he survive? You're Nien Nunb. You would know. You have a direct line to Nien Nunb. So, because the last you see of him, he's in the cockpit of the ship, and there's sparks flying around everywhere, and it appears the ship is going down. And that's the last time you see him.
Right. But that's the thing. You don't see... I mean, the intent was that he was going to go after Hero. And JJ and I had that conversation, and I thought, okay, this is fitting. This is good. Let's go out with a bang. And I was okay with that. And there was a shot in an earlier edit that showed the Tantive 4, exploding or going down or whatever. You knew it was over. And that's the convention in Star Wars films is whenever somebody gets hit, they, you see inside, and then they cut to the exterior, and you see and bits flying everywhere. And so you know that they're gone. That always happens every time. Oh, that was so much fun. I enjoyed that. That was one take too. But but in the final edit, that shot was removed, and then you see him do that stuff, just like you saw some of the other characters sort of go through Palpatine's electricity. But then shortly afterwards, Poe says, "Oh, we're back online," and then it looks. There's a shot later above the trees that looks like something like the Tantive 4 starting to land, but I don't know if it's that or not. So to me, because we didn't actually see it, he didn't.
Oh, good.
Even though, but here's the thing: the storyboards and the script, the final script, and the storyboards that were used to shoot stuff were what were passed on to the novel writers. And so in the book, he does die. He definitely dies in the actual official novel. Yeah. But in the film, we don't see it, and so I don't think he's dead. I don't think he is.
Okay, no, I'm with you on that.
And the celebration at the end, the reason you don't see him there, anyway, was because that was shot about halfway through the film, or 3/4 through the film, when he was going to die. So, so he wasn't shot chronologically or anything. So and I wonder what the reasoning was that they pulled that shot out. And I'm thinking maybe it's actually because it's the Tantive 4 and it's the first ship we see in Star Wars that has that gives the plans to Leia and stuff. She was in that ship, wasn't she? So
yes.
So I'm wondering if they want to keep that as a character for some future stuff. They didn't want to actually destroy it at the last minute. They thought this is an important vehicle in the Star Wars history. Maybe we shouldn't just kill it. Maybe we should keep it in case we want to use it again in something in the future. So that's my theory. It's not been confirmed or denied in any way. That's just what happens. That's the story I play out in my little head when I go to bed at night. So
well, again, I think there's anyone closer to Nien Nunb than you. So if that's what you're saying, then I'm sticking with that.
I think so.
Nien Nunb lives.
I'm too close, but it was lovely to pilot that ship, of course, and we shot a load more stuff with it that wasn't used. We went in and out of hyperspace. It's like all the stuff that you love to play as a kid, and the guy that was my coach, they switched him out for a stunt guy, but there were actually 2 stunt guys behind me because of the explosions and stuff, and then my co-pilot, he was actually Mumford from, do you know Mumford and Sons?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually him.
The Mumford? That was Mumford?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think his stuff got cut, and because it was just a short little quick scene for the pacing of the film. Editing is everything in the film. So so it never really came out that was him. But
wow.
So, but it was great fun, and it was really exciting because they rigged the whole ship up with all these explosives everywhere, and the stunt guys were behind, and I was in this highly flammable suit that I couldn't see out of or get out of, and I thought this is going to be great. These are professional trained stunt guys. They can see, they can run out the back, they can jump out the window. I'm like stuck here. If I go up in flames, it'll be another story to tell. But,
so Nien wasn't a puppet. He wasn't a puppet. That was you in the suit with
for all the new films and the Disney ride. It's now an animatronic head like the one you showed. That I'm holding, and so it's a radio controlled face that I look through the eyes. So when he blinks, so it's an animatronic mask, and I have one puppeteer outside that we communicate back and forth with. And I tell him what I usually rehearse with the head off, so I can show what my intent is and how I want to what my expressions are and what my thinking is, and then I get the puppeteer to try and reproduce that when the head goes on. So
wow, that is fascinating. And
it's great. It's good because it meant I could run around now and I could interact with everybody, just like a normal guy. So I was a lot freer in many ways.
And you get to shoot scenes. You get to shoot scenes inside the X-wing cockpit too, which is pretty exciting.
It was. I was a bit nervous about that because they were doing all our shots, in one day, and it was this big rig. It was the same rig they used for the Falcon cockpit that you see in the documentaries. and it's all remote controlled with a perimeter fence around it, and it's like 30 feet in the air, and they strap 2 cameras to it, you know, like a front and a side, and then they run like hell and hit the button, and off we go, you know. So you're in this sort of bucking bronco. So I thought I was going to get motion sick in that thing, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
And we just did one take at the very end of the day. It was all shot outside so they could get the actual daylight on us for the daytime scenes. And we did one take where we'd literally just sort of talk each other through it. So between the puppeteer and myself, I'd say, okay, I'm going to look out the window now and say something after 3, and I'd count him into it so he'd know when to blink and then when to start talking. So, you know, 3, 2, 1, da 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 da. So, you know, it just gave the puppeteer a nice cue. But we got about halfway through the take, and my power cord, because I was being thrown around, it got disconnected and the face went dead. And so they cut the take, and that was it. That's what you see in the film. Basically one, 2-3 minute take. I don't know how long it actually was. It's just a string of stuff, and that's what you see in the film.
Well, perfect.
It was a rush, though. I mean, it really was a rush. It's like, oh my God. And they gave us these schematics, big giant schematics of the Falcon cockpit. And everything. These are what all these buttons do. Everything had a purpose, and there's a startup sequence, and this is what you use for firing, and this is what you use for shields, and this is what you use for torpedoes, and this is how you turn the electricity on. This is how you heat up your hot pocket, and everything. We had to learn that. We actually had to learn how to start up the X-wing in case they wanted to shoot that.
Wow. Yeah, I can just imagine Harrison Ford memorizing all of those buttons and what they do. Something tells me that when it came to the Falcon, he would just punch whatever he wanted.
I'd just say, I got a bad feeling about this. Hit it, Chewie. And Chewie would do it all.
That's right. Chewie did all the button pushing. What am I saying? Yeah.
So,
hey, Mike, as a puppeteer, it must thrill you now that the most popular character in Star Wars is a puppet. And I'm talking about sweet, sweet baby Yoda.
Isn't that cool, though? It's kind of neat. Yeah, actually. And people just love that thing. Yeah. Yeah, back to, a lot of practical puppet stuff again in the new shows. So, it all lives on, doesn't it? And one thing informs the next and feeds on to the next. So, it's just this growth thing that just is this whole life cycle almost, in a way, I think.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, for sure. But the level of acting we get out of Baby Yoda, I think, is pretty impressive. Because, it's
very
so
focused, very specific, but that's the directors too, and knowing exactly how to get what they want. They're both sort of super clear and experienced and smart and clever, so they know how to use stuff properly. Get someone else in on it, and it could have been terrible, could have been horrible. So yeah. It's lovely.
Mike, I know it's hard to speculate, but given the absolute deluge of Star Wars projects coming and your unique set of skills, is it possible that you could be returning to Star Wars universe at some point? Uh-oh.
He's thinking about it.
Actually, it is. Well, of course, if I've come this far, haven't I? And I'm not dead yet. So it would be dumb. It would be a fallacy. It would be just awful. It would be a disservice to the fans to not have me back on any of the new stuff. And they wouldn't want to be. You wouldn't want to make the fans mad. So they're going to have to pull me in on something, right? But
yes.
Like on the last film, I got to work on other characters besides Nien Nunb, which is what I wanted to do. So I got to work on Bulio, on doing his eyes. The guy feeding the information through, and the Akbar's son. I did some eye work on him as well. He was his son, wasn't he? So then some other creature stuff. In the what was that place where the Tantive was landed, and we had all those creatures running around in the jungle there. So I worked on a couple of other creatures in that as well. So it's nice to just be a puppeteer and jump in and do stuff. Oh, and one of the baby Akis too at the in the Jordan. Yeah, remember those? So I was near the front there, right at the front. Watching the puppet show, and we shot loads more, and only a tiny bit got used, but But so I got to do that as well. So I got to do some hand puppetry, some animatronic work, and some radio control work for other people's faces and stuff. So
you
it's
mentioned
yeah.
You mentioned Billy Dee on the set of The Rise of Skywalker. Were you in any scenes with him?
Yeah.
Like, I know he talks to that one puppet in his little transport.
We did do that, yeah. In fact, earlier on, there was going to be more stuff. Originally, Nien Nunb was going to be on the Falcon, and there was a scene where Nien and 3PO had an exchange, and Nien Nunb and Aftab were going to be in the gun turrets of the Falcon. So that was like earlier on, and that all kind of changed. But there's the scene where they're in a circle underneath the belly of the Tantive, and they're making plans, and Billy's sitting on that box. I'm opposite him behind Snap. I don't even remember the configuration there, but I'm actually behind him. You kind of have to look carefully, but yeah, I'm there. So I had one scene with Billy Dee. I wish they'd put me next to him. I think that would have been really cool. But then that would have set up an expectation to see them together in the Falcon later on. So it kind of made sense to not put us together.
Are you aware that Billy Dee Williams told Nien Nunb he looks like a stack of pancakes in the Robot Chicken Star Wars special?
Yes. Well, that's a compliment. I mean, hey, it's food. We both enjoy our food, so what can I say?
Yeah, I don't know if it was an insult or a compliment, but it was said. And now every time I look at Nien Nunb, I think
no
about
news is bad news.
Pancakes.
Yeah, the Pancake Kid, he's known as. But if they stop talking about you, that's when you have to worry. So no, it's
there
all
you
good.
Go. There you go.
He can call me anything he wants. So.
Yeah, and bring the maple syrup.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the drool. That's the snot from his nose.
We could talk to you forever. Your ability to recall, the dates and the years and everything. Right. It's just so much. It's so much fun, and I love that you. It seems like you enjoyed every minute of it, which is great
I really
to talk
do. I love being on set. I try to be the first to arrive and the last to leave, and I'm sad when it finishes and when it doesn't happen, and I can't wait to do more. I just love being on set and being around. To me, regardless of what the end product is, that's almost neither here nor there, and I can't control that anyway, whether it gets finished, whether it's great or whether it's terrible or whatever. That's really not what it's about, but just going through the process and being part of that family and making new friends and being creative and the challenges that each new day brings, and learning, and just it's about the experiences to me. And yeah, I do miss that, and I look forward to more, hopefully soon. So
we do too. So we'll keep our eye on you, and if you are popping up in some other things, we would love to have you back here on Rebel Force Radio. And it's been an absolute privilege to talk to you. It's been really fun.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, thanks for the laughs and making me trying to remember stuff. So it's good. It's gone quickly, hasn't it?
Sure.
It has, and I would invite anyone, because we just scratched the surface really of Mike's career, and you just Google him and read all the credits, and particularly everything that he's done associated with the Muppets. It's just, if you're a Muppet fan, which I am, it's incredible. And Mike, you got to be happy that it's all available now on Disney Plus. So much of the Muppet catalog and.
It's wonderful.
And the Star Wars work.
Everything goes back to Disney now, whether it's Pixar or Star Wars or Muppets. It's just all on Disney now, so it's kind of really interesting.
Do you have a favorite?
Because when I was our favorite what?
A favorite Muppet episode.
A favorite Muppet episode.
Muppet Show.
Gosh, Muppet Show.
We like the one with Mark Hamill for obvious reasons.
Well, you know what? That is pretty good. I have different memories, and it does kind of keep shifting. One that really stayed with me, though, was the very last one they taped, and it was Gene Kelly. Maybe it's because it was the last one, and because it was Gene Kelly.
In the Rain,
but I got to see him. They recreated that Singing in the Rain set, and turned the water. He walked through it one time just for blocking, and then he did one take, and that was it. It was just magical to see that.
And then legend.
Yeah, and he did. I saw him do the little dance with Kermit and do his songs backstage with the Muppets. All his stuff was pretty well done in one day. So I mean, just stuff like yeah, you know, that's old Hollywood right there. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't get better than that. But I don't know, it changes a lot depending on what I remember. Or sometimes, you know, I go back to when I really was first obsessing with the older shows, and so I have fond memories of those because that's sort of when I got drawn into it all. But I don't think I have a favorite episode, actually. Having said all that, I don't think I do. I think I just love it all. So.
Well, it's obvious. Your love of what you've done is just, it's great. We enjoy it and appreciate it, and we appreciate you,
Thank you.
here on Rebel Force Radio, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, hope you'll have me back. I'll look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Well, dude.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Yeah, cheers. You
All
too.
right, bye-bye.
Bye.